Episode 7 of Season 4 of Fargo was titled Layaway. Josto makes a bold move. Lloyd battles his demons, and Oraetta silences her critics. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. I'm back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of Season 4 of Fargo. We're talking Episode 7, Layaway, a setup episode, to say the least, but a very interesting episode. Some very bold decisions by our lead characters that we're going to break down in this spoiler review. Before we dive into it, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. That way you all can stay up to date on what's going on over here at Movie Files. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Make sure you all subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other Fargo reviews, other TV reviews, movie reviews, live streams, all the fun things we do on this very channel. It would mean the world to me if you all can give this video a thumbs up. It helps out the channel, but I also really appreciate it. And in the comments, for those that have seen this latest episode of Fargo, let's discuss this being I guess there's some people that might consider this a filler episode. There's people like me that think this is more of a setup episode, but let me know your pros, your cons, and of course your theories for the weeks ahead. And let's have a great discussion about it in the comments below. So again, as I've been doing these last 6 or 7 weeks, briefly going over my overall thoughts. I thought this was a solid episode. Again, I personally feel I don't think it's a filler because there were some big moments that happened and the narrative still moved forward, so it isn't a filler episode by the definition of filler. But I did feel like this was more of a setup for the weeks ahead. You know, we get the reveal with obviously a lot of decisions made by Josto. I think some really stupid decisions, but also we know that his motives are he wants to get his brother off this, situation. And then Lloyd, man, he made some really bold decisions himself. I think in normal circumstances, you would have thought that he would have thought with his heart and his passion and his anger, but he's actually, all those lessons that he's learned from Doc over these years, or I'd imagine all these years that he took in all his insight, that it really kind of stuck with him because he made some decisions that I know for a fact Josto would have made, or Gaetano would have made, or anyone in his position. So this was a very interesting decisions made by Lloyd. I think it really, again, sets the stage for the Fodder family really coming at heads, and then maybe the Cannons coming together as well as their army that we know they've been kind of setting up behind the scenes. So nonetheless, I was pleased with this episode, but I can see where some people might have issues with some of the pacing, and it really felt kind of quick. And again, it was more of a setup than it was like a singular kind of narrative within this individual episode. But we'll get into that at the end here. But let's get into this recap, starting off with the first scene here. We open with Oraetta keeping her promise as she delivers her macaroons to the doctor. Now, we all know that it's not a good idea to take treats from Oraetta. We see that ultimately that these macaroons have been poisoned. I assume the doctor is now dead. He's off the plate, which will be very interesting to see if Josto hears about this, because again, we remember Josto wanted the doctor dead, and now he is dead, but we'll see if he'll get the news and if he's happy about that. But nonetheless, we see that in Orietta's sickened mind, this is her best way of getting to that letter. I think there could have been some other ways besides killing the doctor, right? But nonetheless, we see that, and again, I don't know if he's dead. He might just be poisoned and might not be able to speak, or I don't know. We'll see. I think he's dead, but who knows? But we see that she gets the letter. She still hasn't seen who the letter was written out to. Now, to me, I mentioned in my first review, when it comes to Oraetta, when it comes to Rita, they're two of my favorite characters, right? And I felt like this storyline has just been dragged on a little bit too long. I would have thought by now, being that it was almost 3 episodes ago that Rita left her journal in Orietta's apartment, that she would have put 2 and 2 together, but yet it's taking like 2 or 3 episodes for that storyline to kind of come to a head. So I hope that this is now the definitive, even though the name wasn't on the letter, I hope that she now starts to realize there's only been 2 people in my apartment, Josto and Rita, so I hope that storyline kind of wraps up, because again, it seems like it's a little bit too drawn out for my personal taste. Now, as we transition to the next scene, I personally think that the title of this episode should have been called Bold Moves, because we see a lot of moves being made by our 2 lead characters. We see Josto making a very interesting decision very early on as he finds the body of Antoon, as he tells Count Calamina to kill everybody, and that includes Lloyd, obviously, and the Cannon family, but also kill Rabbi. So again, Josto is kind of a loose cannon at this point. Again, it's a matter of his ego and him having this kind of battle with his brother. But again, this was a lot of decisions made by Josto, and we'll get to Lloyd and his decisions a little bit later. So speaking of Lloyd, we get the complete opposite decision making by him as we see that he tells his guys that he doesn't want to kill Gaetano. Now we see that Leon is the opposite of that, and a lot of his people are like that. And speaking of Leon, we see that Leon gets his ass beat. He gets punched in the mouth by Lloyd. We also see him get literally whooped by Lloyd with the belt, as he mentions that there should be, blood on their hands. They should kill the Fada family. He also suggests, he brings up Dr. Senator, which obviously sets off a trigger for Loy as we see him beating him down. So again, we see Loy making smart decision not to kill Gaetano, because that is a very valuable piece to this kind of war and kind of them having some leverage. But also we see that anger. We see, again, he's still grieving the loss of Dr. Senator, and I kind of like that the show hasn't just kind of brushed that over, right? But again, I feel bad for Leon because he literally got his ass beat by Loy. So as we transition to the next scene, man, I'm loving this Timothy Oliphant craze that we're in. So not only has he been doing a good job in this show, in my opinion, as the Marshal, but he's also, I don't want to spoil anything for those that haven't seen the Mandalorian season 2 premiere, but he makes an appearance in that show. I just love that he plays these sheriffs and these deputies, and I just love Timothy Oliphant. But nonetheless, in this scene, he, after weeks of kind of spying on Otis and his dealings with the two families, he calls him out and calls him a rat, and he's buttering his bread, right? And there's only two sides to a coin, so I love that conversation. And really what I'm thinking about is, okay, now that Defi has approached Otis, what is he going to do with that information? Is he going to turn him in? Does he have his own alternative motives? Let me know what you all think Defi's going to do now that he knows Otis is working with both families. Is he going to turn him in? Does he want a slice of the pie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So for me, this was a moment when the show had really back-to-back great scenes. So coming off of that Defi confronting Otis scene, we now transition to the Cannon's house. Now again, we got the orders. We saw Count getting the orders from Josto to kill everybody. So his first location is to go to the Cannon's house, where he knows that Zero is there, but also the Cannon's family is there. So we know as he approaches the door, like I'm thinking to myself, well, he's going to kill this whole family. But no, I love this monologue that we get from Mrs. Cannon, who's been a background player. She's shared some scenes with her husband and, appears every now and then. But this was my favorite scene by her, as she gives him this dialogue about, has he ever been to the zoo? And do you wonder why the mama bear is locked up in the cage? It's to protect her own, but also to protect the people from her, because she is a feast lion. I love that moment as she pulls out the shotgun on Count and essentially kindly asks him to leave the house. But no, I just kind of like that scene because, again, it just kind of goes into this mindset of she's not your average wife. She obviously, we know very early on in the season, she knows what her husband does, even though they had that moment where they kind of was pushing back at Loy about his approach and obviously about the trade with Satchel. But she is a wife that knows what her husband does, and she is about that life as well, as she pulls a shotgun on him and like I said, kindly asks him to leave the house. But I really like that scene, and I would love to know if you guys enjoyed that scene as much as I did in the comments below. So we transition to the Smutney's house, and this was a very interesting scene. We see that the Cannons are dropping off some of their belongings, aka some illegal stuff that we would imagine are in those boxes. But this is a theory that a lot of you all have been theorizing for the last couple weeks, and this is the first time that Lemuel and Oraetta are sharing a scene. Now the theory is, for you all that don't know, is that those two characters are gonna come together and have a child, and that child is Mike Mulligan, who's from season 2, which I think that theory kind of makes sense. The ages kind of match up in regards to when season 2 takes place and when season 4 is taking place. So I think that theory is really kind of shaping up, especially now that they finally met. But also a very interesting moment. Again, we get another supernatural moment. We see one of the dead corpses opens his coffin, looks at Lemuel. Again, I'm so excited to learn more about the supernatural and why we see these ghosts. We see the snowman. I'm so excited to learn about that because, if you all don't know, I'm a horror fan, so I love when the show kind of adds that element into it. But again, let me know if you guys think that theory will come true about Lemuel and Oraetta having a baby and who that baby's going to turn out to be. But also, what's your thoughts on these recurring kind of appearances from these ghosts? Let's talk about it in the comments. So at this point in the episode, we're at the halfway point, and we get this meeting between Josto and Loy. Now, we know that this meeting was inevitably going to happen. I like how Abel was there to try to temper the tensions, kind of get the temperature in the room a little bit down, because obviously we know we've lost men on both sides. But Abel first apologizes to Loy and mentions to Loy that the death of Dr. Senator wasn't supposed to happen, and that him and Dr. Senator were friends. Obviously, Loy doesn't want to hear that. But within the same conversation, we see Abel reminds Loy that Gaetano is not someone you kill, right? And that by killing him, it's just going to set off a chain of just a bunch of death on the Cannon side, right? But in this conversation, he offers a proposal. So this proposal, this trade consists of giving Gaetano back to the Fada family. In exchange, the Cannons will get the slaughterhouse and the truck routes. Now, this is where things get very interesting. We see Josto makes another very interesting decision. We see that he decides to tell Loy that Constant Kanamina has killed Satchel, that he's this loose cannon, he's this wild card, he's out on the go. So in exchange for an eye, blood for blood, death for death, we'll allow you to kill Gaetano. Now, we know Josto has been trying to get rid of his brother so much this season, but I think that decision is going to bite him in his ass, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But very interesting decision. And then even more surprisingly, again, this is the difference between Josto and Loy. Loy gets that information. Okay, you're going to give me the slaughterhouse, you're going to give me trucking routes, and I can kill the man responsible for killing Dr. Senator. He decides to take the offer of sword and extents. We'll talk about his other decision about Gaetano, but he allows them to leave with no circumstances whatsoever, which was a very interesting decision on his part, to say the least. So again, very interesting decision by both characters. We see the different leaderships that they have, the different ways that they communicate. We see the decisions being made by these characters. But again, I'm thinking Loy, all the lessons from Dr. Senator has really kind of stuck with him. He's making some good moves compared to Josto, who's just kill this person, kill that person, get rid of my brother. Very interesting decision, no less. So now we transition over to Loy as he's at his house, and we see how this decision is weighing on him, that he could have killed Gaetano, but he's yet to do it. But instead, we see him going upstairs, getting this rope, almost alluding to him wanting to kill Zero because of him knowing that he just lost his son. But again, he makes another smart decision and doesn't do it, but we see that he does ultimately tell his wife of the news of his son dying, and we see her screaming, being obviously upset. And this is interesting to me. I just want to know from you all, as far as an audience member, we know that Satchel is fine. He's not dead. But did you appreciate the character development? Did you appreciate that the characters we saw the levity of that news, and they didn't just brush past it, and as an audience, we don't see the repercussions, we don't see their effect? Did you appreciate that, or did you feel like it was unnecessary? Me personally, I like that they showed that they thought, or they think that Satchel is dead, but I'm just curious on if you guys thought that was kind of maybe wasted space, or they could have maybe had other scenes in that instead of that. So I just want to know where you guys were coming from in regards to, as an audience member. Did you appreciate it, or did you feel like it was a waste of time? Let's discuss it in the comments below. Also, don't want to leave out the fact that after Loy, losing Dr. Senator, thinking that his son is dead, that as he's driving on the streets, he notices a sign alluding to the offer that he gave the bank regarding the credit card. So again, it's just showing you that Loy has just been beaten down, and he's yet to make this rash decision to just go to war and kill out the people. It just shows you the character of Loy, that he is a tamed, mob boss, and he doesn't just necessarily act out of violence or act out of ego. He's very aware of the circumstances. Again, he's a black man living in his time, and we see that the world just continues to throw curveballs at him, throwing all this death at him, and he's making some really good decisions. But again, that was just like the ice on the cake when he sees that the credit card that he offered to the bank his idea has been stolen. So going back to Otis, catching up with him, we see that he's trying to attempt to leave, but he's stopped by the cannons, and they take him to where Gaetano is, and this is where we see Swanee and Zelmar kind of poking fun at him. I really enjoy those characters, and it'll be interesting to see if they come back, because in this same scene, we hear Loy, he comes in, tells Otis to close his ears, and tells Zelmar and Swanee to leave, to go to Philly. And in a kind of weird way, this is like his way of thanking them for the job that they did. He doesn't want blood on their hands. He doesn't want the death on his hands. So he tells them to leave and to not come back. So again, I think it's safe to say, knowing what we know so far about Zelmar and Swanee, they're going to make an appearance again in this season and probably go against what Loy said. But it's really interesting, again, that he offered them this kind of sanctuary. He's a kind man at heart, that he doesn't want their death on his hands. So very interesting scene, no less. So yet another good character moment for Loy, and also I think a really good performance and speech by Chris Rock as he tells Otis about the idea of how society deems him an animal, and that you sometimes have to get in the dirt, and they want you to become an animal by the things that they allude to him, and also killing his son. But he's not going to stoop down to their level. He's going to be smarter. He's going to elevate over the violence and make really good decisions. I thought that speech and that performance by Chris Rock, as I had mentioned in the last few weeks, his character at first to me was just very stale, very generic, but as the season has gone on, his character development, his arc has really kind of improved me and really impressed me. And I think that his character has really went from like kind of a bottom tier character to really being one of my favorite characters in the show so far. So as we wrap up this episode, we see Gaetano all beaten up, making threats about how he's going to kill the cannons. But in another really interesting decision by Loy, he ultimately lets Gaetano go, but he also lets him go with the message: tell your brother that we're going to take the stockyards. are going to be completely ours. But I think this was a really smart decision by Lloyd, because I think by letting this loose cannon, letting this wild animal and Gaetano back to his brother, which his brother wanted him dead, I think his idea is Lloyd thinks that these two brothers are going to just kill each other. They're going to wipe each other out. I think that's why he let them go. We'll see if it'll bite him in the ass or if it'll play to his advantage. Let me know what you all think about this decision. But overall, just again, as we wrap up the episode, we see that Lloyd gives the orders to kill, Constant Kanamina and to find him and all that stuff. And I think in doing so, they're going to find Satchel and find Rabbi and get the son back. But again, I thought that this was a setup episode, but I still think as far as the character goes, as far as all the characters in this episode, I think that Lloyd has really pushed the needle forward. We see that he's not going to react on emotions. He's not going to act on the fact that he's black and the credit card idea has been stolen, that his, Dr. Sinner is dead. He thinks his son's dead. He's not acting off of emotion. He's thinking with his head. He's thinking about his family, his legacy, moving forward beyond this very moment. So I think that even though this was a setup episode and really didn't, give us a lot of stuff that we would hope for, I think that the character of Lloyd really kind of grew on me and really kind of sets the stage for him and his mindset. And hopefully as the weeks go by, again, one of the things that's been really kind of annoying of sorts is Oraetta and Etheretta kind of being in the background and really stretching on their narrative. I hope that their subplot gets a little bit more meatier and they get more things to do. We'll see what Deafy does with the information with Otis. We'll see what comes of Otis, of course. But then the biggest thing is, what is Josto and Gaetano going to do after Gaetano knows that Josto ordered for him to die? So I think next week will be a very interesting episode, to say the least. I think Rabbi and Satchel will be saved by the cannons, and I think we can expect maybe Constant to be killed off next week. We'll see. But I want to know what you all thought of this episode. I want to know your thoughts, your theories, your predictions, your pros, your cons, and let's have a good discussion about it in the comments below. As always, like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other Fargo reviews, other TV reviews, movie reviews, live streams, all the fun things we do on this very channel. Thank you all for watching this review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you all on the next video.